Warriors of the Infinite, welcome to Chapter 10, The Cave. Steve was elated. He helped Nakandari Sensei banish his demons and also learned a great deal about them. He managed to raise the Shisa and, for the first time, truly began to believe he may have a greater purpose in life. He rushed back to find Megumi retching in the bathroom. She emerged looking unwell, and Steve insisted on taking her to the local hospital. She assured Steve she was fine and said, "It's stressful being back in my home city, and with Tanya being somewhere with that monster, I just can't rest." Megumi looked pale and anxious, and Steve was sure she seemed to be rocking herself more since she had arrived in her hometown. She eventually said she was feeling a little better and she would perhaps visit an aunt later in the afternoon. Steve explained to Megumi everything which had happened in that morning. She was both amazed and concerned and said, "I saw my father do some outrageous things when I was a little girl. All of my life I've associated those supernatural abilities with evil. So it's strange to learn how you helped Nakandari Sensei with yours. I'm proud of you, but I worry what might happen to you if your power grows. My baby love, I only have bad memories here. Please find Tanya and let us leave as soon as possible." Steve had noticed a growing tension within Megumi since she arrived and began to worry about the decision to bring her closer to her father. Steve gave his wife a comforting kiss and asked if she would be okay alone. She assured him she was fine, and he reluctantly left to go with Uncle Taki to find Tanya. Steve went back to the dojo to find Sensei clearing his gardens outside. He asked if Uncle Taki was still there, and Sensei said he had already left and was looking for Sammy Black Eyes. Steve was disappointed and angry to learn Uncle Taki had left without him and implored Sensei to tell him anything which might help find Taki. Sensei said, "I sensed a new disturbance when the demons were still with me, 10 kilometers south of here near the Gyokusendo cave. It happened at the time Taki believed Sammy Black Eyes arrived with your friend, Steve-san. My heart tells me to go with you, but my mind reminds me the demons know me too well. I'm not yet whole again. I'm still vulnerable in their presence. I should not go until I am remedied. Otherwise I could just as quickly become another enemy inside the caves. It pains me not to assist you after all you've done for me. Please know that Kumicho, your father-in-law, rules the darkness in the souls of his people. If Taki is deep inside the caves with Sammy Black Eyes, the danger will not be of this earth. You must be aware and search deep within yourself for your answers. Your powers are yours to command." Steve was grateful for the advice and realized he only had a few hours of daylight left, so immediately left and hailed a taxi for the Gyokusendo cave. The taxi driver had a wealth of information about the cave and surrounding area. The cave was 5 kilometers deep and less than a kilometer was open to the public. People had gone missing near there for as long as history had been documented, and the driver said he never enjoyed going anywhere near the region. He touched the Daruma doll hanging from his taxi's mirror for good luck. Steve wondered if he should ask the taxi driver to stay and wait for him, but the driver looked extremely eager to leave as soon as they arrived at the cave. He departed soon after Steve paid the fare. Steve surveyed the perimeter of the cave, which is surrounded by a beautiful, lush green landscape. The climate bordered on being tropical. The region shared its latitude with Hawaii, and the thick vegetation could have been from anywhere in the world on the same latitude. But the vibration Steve began to feel reminded him precisely where he was. His body reacted involuntarily to the sensation. His body's core tightened and his shoulders rolled forward slightly as his breathing began to focus through his diaphragm. He was a trained fighter and he could sense a looming threat. The vibration seemed to be the most powerful from inside the cave, and Steve abandoned the thought of more thoroughly examining the thick forests outside of the cave. It was near closing time and Steve was only allowed in after using every bit of his charm. His limited knowledge of native Okinawan helped his cause. The cave was quite stunning, beautifully lit with innumerable stalactites and stalagmites and waterfalls and pools of water. It would have been nice to enjoy the scenery, but Steve's head was increasingly throbbing with vibrations as he ventured deeper inside the cave. He reached the end of the tourist permitted area and deftly jumped over the rails. The cave was almost pitch black in the non-tourist designated area. Thanks to the taxi driver, Steve realised there might be 4 kilometres of cave paths to traverse. He was completely unprepared. Yeah, I go deep inside a cave without a torch. Brilliant. I must be a genius, Steve thought to himself. He walked for about 20 minutes and came across what looked to be Uncle Tucky's new camera broken in pieces on the ground. If the vibrations weren't enough, then the camera was certainly the catalyst for Steve to quicken his pace. He soon saw a faint light up ahead and heard some muffled and reverberating voices. His senses were overloaded as he tried to decipher what was being said. The path soon opened up into a large cavern which was brightly lit, and his eyes took a moment to adjust to the view. Steve then discerned Uncle Tucky to the left and Sammy Black Eyes with Tanya to the right. Sammy Black Eyes was holding a sobbing Tanya by the throat and shouting at Uncle Tucky. He said, "You think I care about this foreign trash? I will kill her now and I'll enjoy the sound of her last breath. It will be even better knowing you are here to see it, but I don't care. I'm waiting for your little karate boy, and I know he is close now." Steve ran into the cavern and screamed, "Let her go immediately!" At precisely the same time, a cyclone of foul-smelling black smoke entered the area and blocked Steve's view for a moment. When the smoke subsided, Sammy Black Eyes had changed into a monster with the same talons which Steve vividly recalled from the tournament. But there was another creature in the room, and the vibrations and wicked laugh were terrifyingly familiar. The foul black smoke had formed itself into Demon Hiro. Steve noticed a look of shock and disbelief on Uncle Tucky's face. Steve fleetingly thought of a time in his own life when he was completely unaware of such evil. He'd seen all of this before. Demon Hiro said, "It was a good plan, Sammy. We have our little karate boy here now. You will be rewarded well by Kumicho. Karate boy, you come to my world and you think it will be easy for you here? You will be my best demon soon. And Taki, you have annoyed Kumicho for too long. It is your time to die." Just as Demon Hiro turned his focus on Steve, Taki furiously charged at Monster Sammy, who was holding Tanya by the throat. She tried to break free, but the monster merely tightened his grip around her throat and cracked her neck. He dumped her on the ground. Steve ran to Tanya and managed to slide a hand under her head as she fell. Steve was sure one wrong movement of her neck and she would be dead. He quickly packed the soil on the ground to provide Tanya's neck some support and comforted her while pleading with her not to move. Monster Sammy ran at Taki with his talons ready. Taki's response was masterful. He went low and used his low center of gravity to his advantage as he charged at the monster's hips. He managed to knock him to the ground, but Monster Sammy quickly thrust a talon into Taki's thigh, releasing a stream of blood. The blood seemed to empower the wicked creature. He roared and jumped back up. Before the monster could regain his footing, Uncle Tucky had already pounded his fist into its abomination of a face. Monster Sammy was struggling against Tucky's fierce attack. Finally, Monster Sammy gained a solid footing and aimed a talon at Tucky's face. But the stout, ponytailed warrior was again too clever. He dived to the ground, grabbed some sand and threw it at Monster Sammy's eyes. He blocked a talon strike and hand-chopped Monster Sammy in the throat, then kicked him in the ribs. Uncle Tucky had overwhelmed and surprised his evil enemy. Steve was conflicted. How could he tend to Tanya while such mortal risk was present? He pleaded with her one last time. "Please, Tanya, don't move your head at the slightest bit. A single movement and we could lose you. I beg you." He stood and turned to Demon Hiro and readied himself for his lion roar. He unleashed his energy and the lion's forelegs were almost upon Demon Hiro when he vanished into black smoke. As the lion energy dissipated, Steve turned to look at Uncle Tucky, only to see Demon Hiro reanimate immediately behind Tucky. Steve ran to Uncle Tucky and screamed, "Behind you!" Uncle Tucky's response was sublime. He dropped himself to the ground and rapidly shot himself backwards between the legs of Demon Hiro. The movement was such a surprise to Demon Hiro, who had already commenced his deathly attacking movement. His talon shot forward, missing Uncle Tucky, and instead piercing Monster Sammy's chest. Monster Sammy shrieked and fell to the ground as a human with his demonic traits absorbed by Demon Hiro. He was no more. Steve was summoning his lion again, but quickly became concerned for Uncle Tucky, who was right next to Demon Hiro. Demon Hero could disappear any time, leaving Uncle Taki to take the full force of Steve's fighting energy. In the last moment, just before the line launched, Steve pulled the energy back into his fists. His fists glowed a bright orange as he punched Demon Hero. He knocked the demon 5 meters out of him with his first punch and kept hitting him until he fell to the ground. He was only human, and Steve was confident he would finish him. At that moment, he noticed Hiro's demon spirit spring forward, trying to find its way back inside Hiro. Instead, it found Uncle Taki, and the dark, clouded mass of evil had enveloped him. Steve feared he would lose his much-loved uncle to the dark world. He kicked Hiro into the black cloud, and the darkness immediately descended into Hiro instead of Uncle Taki. Hiro's eyes became black again, and then he vanished into that foul black smoke and flew out of the cavern. Steve and Uncle Taki were overwhelmed by the events that transpired, and also with each other's abilities. It was a remarkable effort from both of them. But Steve was genuinely astounded with Uncle Taki's power and resourcefulness. Steve said, "Uncle Taki, what you did today is only possible from a true master. I learned so much from you. I've got to remember to sink my body lower when in battle sometimes. I saw your true warrior spirit. I'll never forget this." Uncle Taki said, "I wouldn't be alive if you didn't come looking for me, and I wouldn't be alive if you didn't use your powers. I'm in awe of you, Steve-san. I'm blessed to be in the presence of someone so remarkable. I believe you may be the reincarnation of Ishiganto himself." Steve didn't agree with the idea. He was a reincarnation of a famous Chinese general, but they looked warmly at each other. What they had experienced was both real and unreal. They quickly turned their attention to Tanya and went to her. Fortunately, she hadn't moved, although she was clearly frightened and in a state of shock. Tears were streaming from her eyes, but she could only whimper instead of talk. Her eyes were saying way too much to Steve and Uncle Taki. She was pleading for their care. They needed to find a way to safely transport her to a hospital. Without a brace around her neck, Tanya would surely not survive the journey to the cave exit. Steve learned something about his powers earlier and wondered if the pulling in of his roar could be used in a different manner. He told Tanya, "I did something today that I've never done before. I think I might be able to create some kind of protecting energy around your neck. I'm scared it may hurt you. I really don't know whether it's the right thing to do." Tanya managed to whisper to them, "Both of you are my heroes. You were willing to give up your lives for me. I don't deserve it. If I die, I'll die knowing people cared about me for the first time in my life. I trust you, Steve, and I know you only want to help me. Please try and tell Megumi I love her so much. I love you all." Steve looked at his hands and focused his energy, his ki. He placed them next to Tanya's neck. He summoned his roar in a different way. He roared deep within his mind's eye, relaxed his arms, and let the energy slowly trickle out of his hands. He created a small ball of orange energy around Tanya's neck, and she was instantly calmed. Steve was able to pick her up and carry her while the energy seemed to provide a safe, reinforcing cushion around her. Uncle Taki's leg was bleeding still, and he was looking a little weary as they made their way out of the cave. It was a long and exhausting walk. As they neared the tourist-designated area, Steve felt those vibrations again. Uncharacteristically cold wind swept through the cave. Steve yelled out to Uncle Taki and warned him something wasn't right. As soon as he sounded the warning, the ominous black smoke had circled them. Uncle Taki yelled, "Watch out!" as he ran in front of Steve and Tanya. A huge stalactite was launched from the cave ceiling, flew through the air directly towards them and pierced through Uncle Taki's chest. Steve placed Tanya on the ground next to Uncle Taki and started summoning his roar when he heard that demonic voice. "I told Taki he would die today. I will come for you another time, Steve Nedelkin, and you will be my greatest slave soul." And with that threat, the dark smoke flew out of the cave. Steve quickly turned to Uncle Taki. He was holding Tanya's hand and looking at Steve intently, as a true warrior with no fear. When he took his last breath, Steve had lost his beloved uncle. He recalled every bit of emotional pain he previously experienced such a long time ago at the tournament. He touched Uncle Taki's face and he felt his warrior spirit pass through his body as it moved on to the next world. Steve had no time to grieve. Tanya's life could still be saved. He ran outside and found a caretaker of the cave facilities and organised an ambulance to take Tanya to the hospital. Steve's next task was to tell his beloved Megumi about their Uncle Taki. How could he tell her when even he was struggling to cope with the cruel reality of their loss? After making sure Tanya was safe in hospital, he finally made it home. He walked in, covered in Uncle Taki's blood, and was in a daze. He looked at Megumi and just couldn't say the words. His mouth was moving, but nothing was coming out. Megumi saw his pain, ran to him and fell on her knees, begging Steve to tell her what she already feared was true. Part of her knew just from the look of Steve's eyes, but she needed to hear it. Steve was unable to look his wife in the eye as he stoically stood tall and falteringly whispered, "Oshiro Takeshi-sensei, Uncle Taki, died this evening as a great warrior. He saved my life and also Tanya's. He is a true master, a true uncle, a true father, a true brother and a true friend." Megumi was already wailing for her beloved uncle, the only man before Steve who loved her unconditionally and had never let her down. Megumi was sobbing and holding on to Steve's leg. He gently picked her up and held her tightly as he allowed his emotions to escape him. Steve told Megumi about Tanya, how she may not live, or if she did, it was likely she probably would never walk again. They both descended into their darkest and most painful places and memories. There was no talk of reprisal, nothing about who, what, why, or where. They were simply hurting and bewildered. They held each other tightly and cried into each other's arms. They eventually drifted into a sleep replete with sequences of cascading nightmares, each one worse than the one it replaced. They awoke early the following morning and both searchingly looked into each other's eyes as if to confirm whether the events of the previous night actually happened. The looks they shared confirmed it was heartbreakingly true. They needed to go to the hospital to see Tanya, but Steve told Megumi he had to let Sensei know what happened to Uncle Taki and then he would quickly return so they could go to the hospital. On arrival, Sensei saw the look on Steve's face and immediately understood the news was grave. "Taki?" he asked. Steve just looked at Sensei, rubbed the back of his head and looking downwards said, "Demon Hero killed him." Sensei was visibly crushed to learn of Taki's death. He tried to remain calm, but his stoic facade quickly faded when he learned it was Demon Hero who killed him. The burden of guilt weighed heavily upon Sensei. He explained to Steve, "When I summoned the power of Lohan, the technique my master learned from his 5 ancestors' master, I didn't fully comprehend the powers in the room. Hiro was already almost completely evil, but he still loved his sister, and I was confident his last remaining goodness would redeem him. But Mike, he carried a demon of war inside him. I didn't realize until the summoning. His Vietnam War experience was unjust. It haunted him, and he suffered much guilt and pain. I am to blame for Hiro, Mike, and Taki, and countless others, and I will carry this burden for the rest of my life. Steve-san, are you sure Taki is dead? Is there any doubt? I fear his spirit may be condemned to darkness. Did Demon Hiro touch him when he was dying?" Steve explained precisely the events which led to Uncle Taki's death, and took some comfort in learning that it appeared Uncle Taki would rest in peace. Sensei warned Steve again. "They know you, and they know your power, Steve. Kumacho is hideous and fierce beyond your power. If Demon Hiro is unable to destroy you, Kumacho surely will take the matter into his own hands. You must leave immediately. Take your wife away from this place. Leave Japan and find a harmonious life elsewhere." He looked Steve in the eyes and grabbed him by the shoulders with surprising strength. It was only at this time did Steve see Sensei's knuckles were scarred and calloused, the obvious markings of a trained fighter. This master has trained all of his life here and fears the power of Kumacho. We should leave here and go far away as soon as possible, Steve thought to himself. He left Sensei in the dojo and went to collect Megumi. Megumi hadn't been well lately. She hated being in her hometown, and the recent trauma only compounded her feelings of despair. She told Steve, "We will go to the hospital. We will pay for Tanya to be transferred to a hospital in Tokyo, and I will care for her there." Steve agreed, and they went to the hospital. Steve could see Megumi was not at her radiant best, but she was still impossibly beautiful, and he noticed everyone looking at her and whispering among themselves. He initially thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but it was indeed everyone looking at her. And as Megumi was asking at the reception lobby about Tanya's location, the chief hospital administrator came to officially welcome Megumi to the hospital. He said, "Dear Miss Megumi, we are honored by your visit to our hospital. It would be my pleasure to personally assist you. How may we be of service to you?" Megumi was gracious with the nervous-looking gentleman and asked about Tanya's location. The administrator promptly found out all he could about Tanya and returned to Megumi and Steve. "Oh yes, the American girl. Very dangerous situation for her. I presume this man is her boyfriend and you are helping them. So kind of you, Miss Megumi." Megumi curtly replied, "This man is my husband and the girl is a friend of ours. We need to know everything about her condition and we must see her immediately." Everyone nearby looked shocked and whispers were abound in every direction. One doctor walking past had the audacity to approach Steve and looked quizzically at him, as if to question his worthiness as a husband to Megumi. The administrator stepped in front of the doctor and bowed to Steve and welcomed him to the hospital in English. Steve replied in perfect Japanese, "Thank you. We would be most appreciative if we can go to our friend immediately." They were escorted to the intensive care unit, and Megumi insisted the attending doctor advise her immediately about Tanya's condition. Everyone in the ward immediately fell silent when Megumi arrived. They all bowed to her and didn't even move or say a word until the doctor arrived. He was a pleasant man who appeared somewhat nervous when addressing Megumi. He assured her that Tanya was receiving his best care and he was doing everything possible to keep her alive. He explained Tanya had been placed in an induced coma. She had suffered a broken neck and a partially damaged spinal cord. It would need many months to recover from this ordeal, and it is possible she may never walk again, the doctor said. Megumi insisted Tanya be transferred to the best hospital in Tokyo, and the doctor said, "She was extremely lucky her neck didn't move 1 millimeter by the time we retrieved her. It would be impossible to move her for many months without causing irreparable damage. Please, Miss Megumi, it is best we care for your friend here. We will give her the best care possible and are most thankful to your father for his donations of world-class testing and monitoring equipment. Please be sure to let him know how truly grateful we are for his benevolence." Megumi resolutely ignored the doctor's request and asked if it was possible to move Tanya to a private ward. The doctor assured her he would facilitate the move as soon as it was wise to do so. "We will prepare a room now and move furniture for you and this girl's boyfriend." Megumi exasperatedly addressed the doctor. "This is my husband. She is our dearest friend, and I expect nothing less than the best attention for her. When I return, I will look forward to your update and am eager to learn all the best practices for her rehabilitation." The doctor bowed to both of them and apologized profusely for any offense given and assured Megumi of his best intentions. Megumi left the hospital with Steve and both were extremely upset. Megumi said, "I wanted to avoid all of this attention here and now I'm right in the middle of it. The longer we are here, the more likely it is that my father will construct a way to enter my life. He is the ugliest man in the world, my love. I do not want us to be anywhere near him." Megumi wanted to go to a temple to pray for Uncle Taki and Steve went with her. She purchased some osenko, incense, and lit it, waved the flame out and began praying for Uncle Taki's soul. Steve did the same and then noticed the elegant, older Japanese Temyana sitting at the back of the temple. Steve reassuringly touched Megumi's shoulder and retreated back to Temyana. Before he even reached her, Temyana was pointing her finger at him. "I warned you. The gods are numerous and old and the demons are powerful here. Taki was a good man. He loved you dearly, my king. But you are on your path. What must be, must be. Your queen is truly beautiful, my king. She has rejected the darkness and has a strength I've not seen for many centuries. She then looked around and said, I haven't been inside a Buddhist temple or Japan for that matter, since the other great one, the priest king, she said. Steve had nothing to say and he held his head looking utterly forlorn. A moment later, something clicked in Steve's mind and he said, the priest king? As he turned to Temiana had already vanished. Megumi finished her prayer and came back to Steve looking extremely anxious. My Steve, I'm worried about Uncle Taki. I can't be sure he is safe. We must see a Yuta Hinako, and she'll be able to tell us. Please let us go now, said Megumi. Steve said, what is a Yuta? I've been living in Japan for a long time now and I've never even heard of this before. Megumi replied, this is older than Japan. The Rukyu have always consulted with the Yuta in matters of concern like this. Maybe you will call them witches. I'm not sure how to say it in English. Please, let us go now. They grabbed a cab and soon arrived at the Yuta's apartment building. She was located on the 3rd floor, and Megumi surprised Steve with how tired she became from walking up the stairs. She would normally leap up flights of stairs. They knocked and the woman opened the door. She was middle-aged with slightly greying wavy hair and was wearing white robes. She was clearly pleased to see Megumi and ushered her and Steve inside her apartment. Megumi introduced her husband. So many people. I only have a small apartment. Sit down, please. Megumi, you look so well. Your life away from here must be good for you. Or maybe your husband has given you peace. Maybe both. You look so good now, she said. Steve thought to himself, she looks unwell right now. I wonder how she used to be when she lived here. Megumi didn't waste a moment. She told her she was there for Uncle Taki, who died the previous night. Taki was always naughty. I always fancied him when I was little. But he always seemed too busy, running around looking after his little sister, your beautiful mother. Let me try to find him, she said. She raised her head, burped loudly and looked around the room and concentrated on the corner where nobody could be seen. Too many people. You are with him? Why are you here? She was nodding and then there were pauses. After a lengthy time, she finally turned her attention to Steve. I am truly honoured to be in your presence. Daruma's very own guide told me who you are. She is the oldest Yuta I have ever met. One of the powerful ones who was there when the world changed. Today I've learned more than I could learn in many lives. The bond with your wife, your queen, creates many possibilities. Some will improve the world again, others will force the darkness to grow, to overcome. Megumi said, Auntie Hinako, I know who you speak of. She's come to me also. The one with the half mask. She's warned me many times about our path. She didn't want us to come to Okinawa and expose ourselves to my father. Steve looked at his wife incredulously. She speaks to you? He said. Megumi replied, I saw you speaking with her in the temple earlier today and we have talked before. She has a job to do, my baby. I used to have a spirit Yuta guide when I was younger. My father found her and banished or destroyed her. She's never returned to me. His way is to kill everything you love. Your guide is also scared of his power. She says she cannot understand why she thinks she knows me. Something binds our royal lines. But none of it makes sense to her or me. Megumi began to rock herself slightly and it didn't go unnoticed by Yuta Hinako, as she seemed to wave something bad away from her. Yuta Hinako said, listen to me. Taki is fine. His soul is pure and he is free of this world and elevated. You have nothing to worry about him. He loves you both dearly and he need not be of concern to you. Megumi, if you remain, your father will either turn Steve to darkness or even worse, he will kill him and poison the mind of your son growing in your womb right now. In any case, he will win and his evil will only grow. You know it. The warnings from Steve's guide are clear. The evil is not even fully formed yet, but is already one of the strongest forces of darkness in the world. Steve's eyes widened as he searchingly looked at both Yuta Hinako and Megumi. Wait, what? We're having a baby? He looked at Megumi and she looked at him with a tear falling from her eye. She said, my body has changed recently. I began to wonder if I might be pregnant. This is a terrible place to raise a child. It's not just morning sickness here. My dreams have been dreadful since we arrived and I can feel my father reaching to me. I'm scared for our child. If I'm surrounded by this evil, it will affect our baby. It affected me all my life until I managed to get away. It was only when I met you that I felt cured, that I could even have a chance to be normal. But now I feel it in every part of me, the darkness, the whispers. But how can we leave while Tanya is still here? Megumi said. Steve said, your and our baby's health is too important. We must leave earlier. After Uncle Taki's funeral tomorrow, we will go back to the hospital and find a solution for Tanya's situation again. Megumi just shook her head. I cannot leave her here alone. I will not do that to her. Megumi insisted Yuta Hinako take some money, which she accepted after much protestation. Yuta Hinako said, I should pay you for the privilege of being of assistance to you and to meet the High Priestess on this day. I will never forget it. Thank you. Steve and Megumi left with mixed emotions. They were having a baby and they were all in danger. The next day would be a funeral for their beloved Uncle Taki, and new plans needed to be made. Steve looked intently at Megumi with his heart ready to explode. Nobody said every day of our lives was going to be easy. Every time I wake up and see you, I'm the happiest man in the world. We're now having a baby made from the deepest love ever known. And I'll do everything I can to keep you and him safe. If I can give my life now and be sure of your and our baby's safety, I'd do it without hesitation. Megumi said, I know, my love, but if you're gone, my life will be over. And our son will be stolen by my father, and our baby will only ever know evil. I cannot lose you. So you see, if I lose you, I lose everything. I have very little to say, my friends. We lost Uncle Taki. One of the saddest things in this story for me, I just felt very attached to Uncle Taki. I felt like he was Mr. Miyagi on steroids. He was just he was a very honourable man and very strong, and he found his honour again thanks to Steve. Steve inspired him, and he found himself again. But you know, did we know everything about Uncle Taki? Were there things that we didn't know about him? He was a good man. We know he was a good man. There's never a single thing he ever did bad. So I grieved for Uncle Taki. I grieve now. So I haven't got a great deal to say. I'm going to finish up with a bit of music I made in honour of Uncle Taki.